I'm Lamar Marshall. As Cultural Heritage Director of Wild South, I've mapped the historical trails of the Cherokee Indians in the Southeast for over 20 years. We're going to share some of this history with the world through Google Earth and 3D tours. This is an introduction to a coming series of incredible trips into the geographical history of this ancient people. This work is dedicated to the Cherokee people and especially the Cherokee elders, past and present, whose collective memories have made it possible to preserve the traditions passed down from many generations. This is a clip that shows our first attempt to integrate graphic historical context into Google Earth tours. Our plans are to take the next level of work to 3D graphics. Cherokee Elder Jerry Wolf took our field team up Rattlesnake Mountain on Qualla Boundary, along a trail where he and his father grazed their cattle over half a century ago. We featured some of the things you might find along a trail, such as medicinal herbs like ginseng, trail markers, and in the past signs of game that might be hunted. The mountain trails followed streams, ridge tops, and almost always crossed the mountains at a convenient pass. Many mountain balls were associated with ancient legends and are sacred to the Cherokees. You cannot separate the integrated mosaic of cultural heritage, history, geography, and ecology. They comprise the fabric of the landscape.
In Cherokee, the word for road is nanohi. Nanohi. And these roads, these paths, these byways, these places where people have traveled were actually much, much more important and much, much older than anybody can really imagine. The way in which they marked them, the bending of trees, the rocks, the rock cairns were essentially very, very old markers. The markings of these places along the way were not just markings of the trail, but markings of specific places or pointing to specific areas. And these markers in these roads were not just markers from one side of the mountain to the other, but were actually a part of a great highway system that allowed people from many tribes to interact with each other. And there was an inordinate amount of trade going on. Things have been found in various places in other parts of the country that are only intrinsic to these mountains.
You can see here that the Cherokees controlled a vast portion of North America before European settlement. Most of their towns were located in western North Carolina, but their claims included parts of 6 surrounding states. Clusters of Cherokee towns were separated by mountains and watersheds. They became known as the Overhill, Valley, Middle, Lower, and Out towns. I've turned on the middle towns and we're a couple of miles up in the air. As you can see, there's lots of data built into Google Earth's files, which are in layers. I've added geographical tags in green, created signposts for towns using ancient pottery designs, and the towns are represented by circular villages. The middle towns lay between Clayton, Georgia, around Franklin, North Carolina, and north to the conjunction of the upper Little Tennessee River and the Tuckasegee River. Niquosi and Ochoa, 2 important middle towns, were located about 300 miles from Charlestown. Now let's look at how Cherokee houses and dwellings changed over the years. Mississippian villages in the Cherokee country and southeast share some similarity to this 3D Nodina village in Arkansas. It was developed by the Center for Advanced Spatial Technology at the University of Arkansas. By the 18th century, the Cherokees were living in open summer houses and warm clay-covered winter houses. They also built corn and bean cribs to store crops in. As contact with the Europeans brought new tools that included iron axes and steel saws, log houses became commonplace, and by the early 1800s, Indian farmsteads resembled those of the ever-encroaching settlements. Going back to our towns groups, the Overhill towns were on the Little Tennessee River, about 350 miles from the large trading town of Charleston, South Carolina. The capital town of Chota was located here. These towns were separated from the valley towns by the rugged Unicoi Mountains. Valley towns lay between Andrews, Murphy, and Hayesville, North Carolina, with a very few remote towns in the Snowbird Mountains and Chioa River. The out towns were located on Tuckasegee and Oconaluftee rivers and included the sacred mother town of Gadua. The lower towns were primarily located in upstate South Carolina and northeast Georgia, but as they were destroyed several times by the British and Americans, they were finally abandoned. Here's a little map I made just kind of showing how the trails are all connecting the towns across western North Carolina. This map will show you in more detail where the Cherokee territorial claims were and where their town clusters were located in relation to modern states. There were and still today are many sacred places that must be protected. For this reason, we won't identify archaeological sites that could be threatened by grave robbers or looters. Other ancient sacred sites are well known today. One place is Whiteside Mountain, or the White Bear, near Highlands, North Carolina. Rising about 2,000 feet above the Chattooga Valley, both the rock formations and the shadow of the mountain resemble a great bear. In order to do this work, I used historic maps, early surveys, journals, and hundreds and thousands of archives to identify where the historic towns and trails were. Masters of primitive technology, the Cherokees lived for millennia free and self-sufficient in the Appalachian Mountains. The Cherokee homeland was a rich land. They followed the cycle of the seasons. In the spring, fish were harvested and dried. The black soils of the river bottoms were fertile, produced a great abundance of beans, corn, and a variety of other staples. By fall, the hunters moved to their hunting camps up in the high coves and hunted bear and elk. They didn't have any reason to emulate the Europeans by raising cattle and hogs, as the bear was their hog, the bison their cow, and the wild turkey their chicken.